Yo, what up guys? It's Flark. Already. New expansion, new me. For real this time, I think. This one's a doozy. This one's pretty exciting. The class design for Frost and Unholy is incredible. Your toolkits feel fleshed out, and the power is built more into the class fantasy and the actual abilities of your class, rather than nonsense added to the game over patches, so you're not even complete until the last season when everybody's quit anyway. I know. There's been a lot of excitement towards recent expansions, and then you were let down. Well, if nothing's able to convince you, let me try something real quick. Here is how you access all of the power, all of the toolkit, everything that makes your class feel like a class. Here it is. Woo! Done. There it is. That's your class right there. All of it. Neat and tidy on the screen. Well organized with different loadouts for builds. All accessible in this menu. I did not need to grind Renown, or Azurite Power, or farm Conduits, or have an arbitrary 2-week cooldown in between every talent decision that I made. None of that. They were here when I logged in, and they'll be there for you too. You can mess around with them with no restrictions. You can create loadouts, well-organized loadouts with names, and switch them anywhere you want. PvP, PvE, otherwise. And when Dragonflight comes out and you get new talents, you don't have to farm aspect power to combine them into an orb of talent increasing and then get an extra point of which you can put one in and then spend another 2 weeks doing it for the second talent on every single one of your alts. No, you just level to 70 and then put them in, improving upon what you have already created in this pre-patch as a basis. You'll just improve upon these builds by hitting level 70. It's going to create even more power behind the concepts you've already made. Enhance them with no cost other than leveling to 70. That's why I think Dragonflight's going to be good. Also, the fact that I had 4 unique builds there, if you saw from my loadouts, and I think all of them have merit. Really transforming Unholy back into that necromancer or disease or rot or pet-focused class, rather than a limb-focused class or a gushing wounds, blood of the enemy dressed focused class, right? That's not what we're looking for. Pretty good stuff. So, Unholy Prepatch Guide. What am I even talking about in this Prepatch Guide? Very simple. I am just going to give you the tools to make the most powerful spec possible so you can do 2 things. 1, play rated arena, because it's actually available. I know it's grayed out, but don't worry, just find a partner, click this and click Q, and you will be able to queue rated arena, get conquest, get honor, upgrade gear, and get rating to upgrade that gear further up all through this pre-patch, this 1 month period. And then also get familiarized with all your talents and all the new abilities and all the new mechanics and dynamics of Dragonflight. So when Dragonflight comes out and you're just adding to this, you've already got this basis, this really fundamental enriching understanding of your class, and you can just build on it instead of having to start all over with borrowed power systems that you never asked for. That is what I'm going to be doing with this pre-patch guide, and we're going to do that by talking about gearing, which will include legendaries, talents, and then at the end, covenants and conduits. Why is that? Because we're kind of in an amalgamation period right now. Believe it or not, if you queue for that rated arena, like I said, grab a partner, click this, click join battle, your legendaries, your covenant ability, and your conduits, so this stuff, will all still be active. And like I said, while that stuff is finally hitting the door, good riddance, you know, get out of here. Come Dragonflight, it's not now, and I want you guys to have as much power as you can in pre-patch so you can have as much fun, because everybody loves winning and everybody loves doing damage, so I'm going to make that possible for you by including all of the mechanics that are available in a pre-patch environment, even if some of them are going to be gone in Dragonflight. Of course, I'll make new guides for Dragonflight, of course I will. But this is a pre-patch guide, so we're milking the pre-patch system. So, let's get into it. Starting with gear, this one's gonna go fast. Gear is very doable. I think I've already figured out the stats for now and for Dragonflight, and that's very simple. Verse, Mastery, Haste. They're all so good, you want a combination of all three. You don't need to hyper stack on one, because I actually think you lose the synergies of having haste with mastery and verse, giving it damage modifiers. Haste really synergizes with Unholy's toolkit. And crit is just completely left behind because it's worthless. Versatility being an output stat, you get healing, damage reduction. That's just the ultimate PvP stat. Of course you want this. But then the synergy really comes between mastery and haste. Mastery increases all your damage, but then haste increases the accessibility of all your damage. For example, faster attack speed, more minion attacks. Mastery gives more minion damage. Faster globals, more of your attacks. Mastery gives more more shadow damage, so more Clying Shadows hits, or more death coils. Those scale with mastery, and they scale with haste because you can get more of them. But also rune generation does the exact same thing. More runes, more Clawing Shadows, more death coils. So that all synergizes perfectly, but it also speeds up those globals in such a big way that you can now go through the entire setup process of Unholy in a quicker manner, allowing you to get that burst off before you start getting peeled, guided, all that stuff, right? Because it's not just enough to have a lot of damage, but you have to get it on the targets in a short window. That's called a burst window. You want to get all of this damage off as quickly as possible so they can't react to it. And haste speeds up your globals. Look at all these globals you have. APOC, Dark Transform, maybe Raise A-Bomb, maybe Unholy Assault, maybe Abomination Limb, right? All of these globals you want to go through fast so you can start doing your damage as quick as possible, and haste provides that. But crit, not only is it just an output stat that's not as good as mastery already, it's doubly not as good because it's 75% effectiveness in PvP environment. So we don't have anything that scales with crit, like Ice Cap for Frost or Killing Machine for Frost. It's just extra output, and if it's 75% effectiveness in PvP, that's bad. It's just worse than mastery. So verse, mastery, haste. How do you get this stuff? Go to Oribos, buy conquest gear from the PvP vendor, and get that conquest from Queuing Arena. Then upgrade it with honor, which you get from Queuing Arena, right? And then make yourself a set. You're going to have enough verse just by getting a set, right? Like, oh, look at this PvP gear. Verse, 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 right? The PvP gear will give you enough first. So what you're doing is you're putting the rest of your stats in haste and mastery. This is what you're going to probably be doing in Dragonflight as well. You're just looking for if a piece has haste or a piece has mastery, and you just don't get the crit ones. Mastery, haste, haste, mastery. All right, I split it right down the middle. And that way you have the most output, the most accessibility to the output, and survivability, because haste and verse combine to be your survivability stats. And there you go, there's your stats. Bada boom, so easy, man. You're gonna be able to do that too. Just find the pieces of gear. Now, legendaries. As I said, they still work in Rated Arena, so I promised I was going to talk about them. You have to get a Unity. If you're just coming back to the game, you have no idea what Unity is. You're going to have to look at a guide for that. This guide is going to be long enough already without just explaining basic Shadowlands mechanics. So Unity, I put it on my ring. Then Frenzied Monstrosity on my cloak. You're going to use this for every build that I provide to you, except for the one called Death Coil, which we will talk about in the talent section. And let me show you what you would be using. Death's Certainty, not Deadliest Coil. Death's Certainty. It makes your Death Coil deal 35% increased damage, and I can only imagine you understand why having your Death Coil doing 35% more damage would be useful in a build called Death Coil. So, Death's Certainty for the Death Coil build. Frenzied Monstrosity, here it is, those monstrosity drapes on the cloak for everything else. Anything else? Trinkets, absolutely. I use the badge. Why? Because it has crit on it. Why would you use that when you could just use insignia that has haste on it? Great question. It's because of this. 451 on-demand strength. Well, with the fusion of the Dragonflight and the Shadowlands mechanics, you do a lot of burst damage. And being able to just press this and get 451 strength on my burst, well, that's really dang good. But does not take away anything from the fact that Insignia has haste, which is a better stat, and more sustain pressure. And yes, Unholy has a lot of sustain, especially with the disease build. So either one, pick your favorite. Do you like bursting more? Do you like sustaining more? Just pick the trinket for that. Finally, Runeforge, Fallen Crusader. I know there's a lot of them, excuse me. There's a lot of Runeforges. Well, you're using this one. It's the best by far. Rune of the Fallen Crusader, put that right on your weapon using your Death Gate to get there. And that is your gearing. Bada boom. We had to go through that fast because this next session, this next talent section, this is a doozy. This is tough. Let's get right into it. So I'll talk about the general Death Knight talents at the end, but first we're going to go through each of my 4 builds: pet damage, disease damage, wounds damage, and death coil. Aptly named to help you guys understand the concept before we even get into it. We'll go through them one by one. I will explain them to you, but most importantly, I will have in the description below, I will have links to those builds. So all you have to do is copy it and click import. Then name it whatever you want. You can use my name, so you don't have to. But that way, not only will we be able to go through the video together and explain it together, you'll also be able to do it firsthand by importing the build, putting it up on the screen, and trying it out and looking at it yourself while I talk about it in the YouTube video. So yes, there's going to be a lot of information to cover, but make sure to import whatever builds you're most interested in so you can go along with me. It will help with the smoothness of this process. So we're going to start with the pet damage build, and I'll give you 3 guesses. What do you think the pet damage build really, really likes? Pet damage, you're right. You're a genius. I'm so proud of you. How do you get pet damage in the Unholy Tree? Well, we're over here on the right side, of course. That's what we're looking at right now, and it is this right side capstone, Commander of the Dead. Dark Transform also empowers your Gargoyle and Army of the Dead for 30 seconds, increasing their damage by 35%. Well, that's pet damage. You know what else is pet damage? Unholy Aura. 20% increased damage from your pets. That's pet damage. And then you get pets. Gargoyle, that's a pet. Raise A-Bomb, that's a pet. Magus of the Dead, that guy, he's a pet. Apoc, that summons pets. All Will Serve, he summons an additional pet. See where I'm getting with this? You get all the pets, you get all the pet damage modifiers, and bada boom, that's an awesome build already. That is the minion damage build. So just to be very clear, this first 5 right up here, you're always going to have them. Festering Strike, Scourge Strike, Raise Dead. That's pretty useful for Unholy. Yeah. Dark Transform. Yeah, we're going to take that. Outbreak. Oh, yeah, we should have a disease, right? So we're never going to talk about these. These are always going to be selected. We're really just looking at how we fuse all of our choices down here to make the best build possible. And with the pet build, you get all the pet modifiers. But you can't really just get those, you have to get to them. So let's talk about some of the choices that I made that are not just the pet modifiers. You can see this is a pet modifier because Dark Transformation cooldown makes your pet do more damage, and so is this because it makes Dark Transformation last longer. So what about over here? Well, All Will Serve goes down this row that has Unholy Pact and Reaping. Unholy Pact is cool because it's just more sources of damage. The one thing about pet damage is not that it's just pets, it's that it's a lot of sources of damage. Your Magus is doing damage, Army of the Dead is doing damage, Gargoyle is doing damage, and it's hard to peel that. Some of it's ranged, some of it's melee. The ghouls can leap at you, right? So even if you like put the DK in a clone, or get a slow on the DK, the pets are all still range pressure, Magus bolts, Gargoyle strikes, leaping ghouls, right? So it's a lot of sources of damage, which means a very synergistic thing for this is other ranged and unpeelable sources of damage. When you press Dark Transform, which will be up much faster now, you get Unholy Pact, which is another source of damage. All right, so when your pet is on them and maybe you're getting kited and your other pets are on them, then you've got all of that pet damage and the hell chain between you adding more damage. Well, what's another way to get ranged pressure so you're very hard to peel, hard to disrupt, more sources of damage? Clawing Shadows. Makes your Scourge Strike a 30-yard range, all mastery. That's fantastic because of, ignoring armor. So does your Gargoyle Strikes. So does your Magus Shadow Bolts. It's just a really nice thing to handle those warriors or the casters that are trying to kite you or the warriors that you're trying to kite. It's like you have the best of both worlds. You can do damage at a range, allowing you to get the ranged spellcasters who are running away, but also to get the arms warriors off you, but still pressure them. Very cool. Furthermore, another way to do that is with this Death Coil package. Sudden Doom makes your Death Coil cost no runic power. That's great. You want to spend your runic power on Death Strike a lot, so having a free one just adds damage to your rotation. Then, Sudden Doom increases your Clawing Shadows damage. We just talked about why Clawing Shadows might be good. Well, making it do more damage is also good. Shocker. And then you get more Sudden Doom procs, which is absolutely fantastic because they are really good in and of themselves, and also they make your clawing do more damage. So it's very clear what you're building for here. Range pressure, unpeelable pressure with a heavy focus on minions. And we got all the minion talents. Of course, there's going to be more additions to these when Dragonflight comes out, but I won't spoil the Dragonflight guides. Believe me, I don't even know what they entail yet. But that is the minion build. So what PvP talents? Raise A-Bomb, of course, he's a minion. Necrotic Wounds, of course, it's your Mortal Strike. You will literally always run this. And then you could probably slot Streng, Spell Warden if it's magical damage here. We'll talk about the PvP talents a little bit more in Dragonflight when the meta is more defined. So I'd really just say if you want to have the highest pressure possible, just run Streng. And so now you got the pet, you've got Necrotic Wounds as your Mortal Strike, and now you've got Stun Silence, which is just such a key part of Unholy because not only do you have this many sources of damage, now you have completely locked down CC for their healer. And you always have damage, which is hard to peel, and then the healer can't heal it. And I mean, you see where this is going. Great build. But we have to go on because we have so much to talk about. So let's now shift gears to disease damage. What could this build be focused? Okay, yeah, right. Diseases. Yeah, good. So instead of the right side, which was pets, the middle end cap or capstone is diseases. But instead of just making that one change and then being done with it, you're also going to slot in all of the disease-centric talents, which is what is so fun and so enriching about this system, especially with the choices. They were so smart on the choices. Speaking of which, we had Clawing Shadows before. What happened? You would want range damage in a disease build, right? Because diseases do damage at a range, so does clawing. Yeah, but look at this. Scourge Strike causes your disease damage to occur 100% more quickly. That's very good for a build called disease damage. Obvious choice. So let's take a look at some of these disease talents right here. Super Strain applies to other diseases. That's really good because your diseases are going to do a lot of damage, but also because it synergizes with morbidity. Diseased enemies take 2% increased damage per disease that's on them, so the more diseases, the better. And you've got Super Strain increasing your diseases, total diseases that you have, but also Unholy Blight giving you another disease for morbidity, which also just does a lot of damage. So what else do we have? We have Even Fever. What does that do? Increases your disease damage. It does 15% more damage, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it does it in half the duration. So now we're over doubling the disease damage from Virulent Plague from this one talent, which also makes you really need more appliers of the disease itself because it runs out twice as fast. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but just keep that in mind. Then, of course, all right, so we have all of the disease modifiers. One thing that's really good with rot-centric builds that always have damage on the target, raw modifiers are so good because let's take a quick look at a scenario real quick. All right, so let's say I increase my damage by 20% with a cooldown, and then I increase it by another 20% with some other crazy modifier that I have, and then I get cloned. Do my damage modifiers matter? If I'm a Rep Pally and I can't Templar's Verdict in that clone? No. But if I have like 6 diseases on a target and a ton of sustain on that target outside of my class and I get those modifiers, it still matters. So these rot and disease-centric builds want modifiers. So I'm only 60 right now. I can only get 1 rank of this, but you can see it's a damage modifier. Into Dragonflight, you're going to be able to get another modifier here and another modifier here. So while this build is going to be good, maybe not overwhelming now, you can already see just by leveling up, going to level 61, 62, how many modifiers are going to be added to this disease-centric build and how much value that's going to be on your rot. And as a result, not only do we get all the disease modifiers, but we also get all the extra sources of damage similar to what we did in the last build. Hell Chains, more damage, more unpeelable damage, more modifiers when we get them. That's valuable. All will serve. Chip damage. Sudden Doom, free death coils, chip damage. Magus to the Dead, chip damage. Apocalypse, well, that's just a core ability. And And Dark Transform coming up faster, which is valuable, more chip damage, right? And more Hell Chains, which means more chip damage, right? So you've got the whole disease package, and you've got a lot of additional chip damage to help utilize those modifiers and provide more pressure. And finally, I promised, what are we doing here? What is Raise A-Bomb doing? What is Unholy Blood? What does that have to do with the whole reapplying? So that's really impactful. Raise A-Bomb, not only does it add more chip damage, he also applies wounds and puts on Virulent Plague. That's really impactful because when you run Eben Fever, you have to spend more runes and more globals on Virulent Plague to get that increased damage because it's half the duration, but you don't want to do that. So instead, you bake it in with Raise A-Bomb and Unholy Blight. As you can see, it infects him with Virulent Plague. And yes, those types of applications do apply Super Strain. So you're not losing anything. It'll reset all your diseases on the enemy, making you get full use out of Eben Fever, right? And that's the disease build. You can see it goes for a very similar approach as the pet build. Hard to peel damage, lots of sorts of damage, tons of chip damage, tons of ranged pressure. But it does it in an entirely different way. That's the craziness of these talent trees. I went down almost entirely unique talents. Wrong, a different capstone, a different side of the talent tree, and it creates something so fleshed out. And we're not even 70 yet. Incredible. Now for this build, Necro Aura. You see how I switched out Strength? I still have Raise A-Bomb, still have Necrotic Wounds, Necro Aura. Your diseases are magical damage. Necrotic Aura is more magical damage. Goes hand in hand. Of course it does. Right? And you need to be closer to your target for this build because you have to drop Clawing for Plague Bringer. It's just too good, right? And that is the disease build. Now the wounds build. What would this focus on? Yes, focuses on wounds. And there are a lot of wounds modifiers right now, so let's take a look at them. This one is fun. So we went down the right before, then we went down the middle, and now we're going down the full left capstone, right? Unholy Assault. You don't need me to tell you why this synergizes with a build named Wounds Damage. This applies wound, gives you haste, faster globals, faster wound spending. Fester Might, spending wounds, increases your strength. We're going to be spending a lot of wounds. That's just a damage modifier. Bursting Sores, more wound damage. Bursting a wound, more rune generation when you burst wounds. Festering Wounds, more runic generation when you burst wounds. Improved Festering Strike also increases your wound damage. Apox spends wounds. Infecting Claws applies wounds. Clawing Shadows burst wounds at a range. You see what I'm doing here? And of course you have good old Raise A-Bomb. He applies wounds. Necrotic Wounds, that's good with wounds. Doom Burst. Have you seen this PvP talent? Not used a lot. It might be now. Sudden Doom, burst 2 wounds. Also, it reduces their movement speed by 90% when it does that. That's really good because it's an off global kinda, because it's baked into your damage, and it doesn't cost runes because Sudden Doom does not cost runic power or runes. So it's like an off global chain, better Chains of Ice. Wow. And it bursts wounds. And you're playing a wound bursting build. So it gives you runic generation and rune generation. So yeah, there's the wound build. Pretty self-explanatory. You get every possible thing that buffs wounds or gets runic power generation or rune generation from wounds, or just gives you something for bursting wounds. Then you get all the ways to apply wounds, Infected Claws, Raise Abomination. I've said wounds a lot of time. Then Festering Strike applies wounds and it does more damage, and wounds themselves do more damage, and then they do even more damage from Bursting Sores, and then they apply an AoE effect whenever you burst a wound, so you want as many wounds as possible. You see where I'm going with this. The only thing that's maybe you didn't really recognize at first is this Death Coil package, because it gives you more Sudden Doom procs, and it gives you, of course, Death Coil free in the first place, and those Sudden Doom procs give you Doom Burst, which bursts wounds, and then of course Clawing Shadows will be buffed, and Clawing Shadows being buffed is great, because when you use Clawing Shadows, it bursts wounds at a range, and we know how valuable that can be in a wound bursting build, and also it itself does more damage, and that's insane ranged burst pressure. It's a very burst-centric build. No pun intended. It bursts wounds and also bursts damage. Yeah, great. Awesome. That one's pretty self-explanatory. The PvP talents are even self-explanatory. Let's go next. Death Coil build. We finally reached it. The final build, the one that just says it's a Death Coil build. There's this package here that we've used almost every time. So what the heck is a Death Coil build? Well, there's a few extra Death Coil talents that we haven't run yet. One of them just says improved Death Coil. Sounds pretty reasonable for a Death Coil build. Makes Death Coil do more damage, but also cleave. Cleave Death Coil is insane because it cranks, and having upfront cleave for Unholy is great against melee cleaves, because before they kind of out-cleaved you, right? Frost, Arms, they just have brooding AoE cleave. You didn't really have that. You kind of like rot cleave. Death Coil strikes them both. You actually have rot cleave, and now you have burst cleave. And then Death Coil, with all of its modifiers, now all those modifiers also make Coil of Devastation dot hit harder. Right here on the screen. Makes Death Coil make them have a dot based on the damage dealt by Death Coil. So the more damage dealt by Death Coil, the crazier this dot is going to be. And of course, you still have that Death Coil package in the middle. But you can't just make the Death Coil package, because then you run out of talents. So what would you add to that? Very simple. The Wounds package, right at the end. Unholy Assault, Fester Might, Death Rot. This makes Death Coil hit harder, because it's just a modifier. This makes everything hit harder, including Death Coil, because it's a strength modifier. Then Unholy Assault gives you Wounds. And you want to spend Wounds to get Fester Might. But also, with the Death Coil package, why wouldn't you just run Doom Burst? So having that little Wounds package in there is very valuable, because you have the Death Coil package, which gives you Doom Burst, and then the Wounds package, which benefits from Doom Burst. So here it is. That's it. 4 unique. None of these builds, well, it wasn't like I changed one talent. All of the builds were like 10 talents separate from each other, and they still all feel complete and powerful, and we're only level 60. I know I went through them fast. I wanted to give you the main emphasis for each build, because I know, again, in the description will be a link so you can import these builds directly, follow along with me in the video, and try them out for yourself. If I talked about every single talent in each iteration of the 4 builds, you would have lost your mind. That's the good stuff right there. Hopefully that helped in some way. You get the most power out of Unholy, and you start getting excited for Dragonflight. But now, we got to talk about the general DK talents. So this is actually going to be the same for both my videos right now, and it's for one simple reason. These are general talents, so they're pretty applicable to both Frost and Unholy specs, but also because at level 60, you cannot quite customize this yet. At level 70, I think you can make some decisions. For example, you can make a physical set and a magic set. You can see the magic set right here. It's AMS, big AMS, AMZ, big AMZ. Right? That's a magic set. But would that be good against Kitty Cleave, Feral Warrior? No, they don't do magic damage, right? So what you would do then is you would create, look at this. If you have 4 damage portions, like 4 unholy portions of these builds, and then 2 different, so like a physical and a magical, general Death Knight talents, then what you do is you just do some multiplication. 2 times 4 is 8. That's 8 total builds. How do I get that? Look at this. Pet damage magic, pet damage physical. Disease damage magic, disease damage physical. Wounds damage magic. You see what I'm doing there? So you would have 8 builds in total. All of your output builds, but then based on what the enemy comp is, you would either want to be more physically defensive or magically defensive. Again, we can't really get that right now because we don't have enough talents for it. And the things that I have on the screen are so important. So let me just go through them real quick. Of course, Chains, Death Strike, Raised Dead. Yeah, that's obvious. You're playing Unholy. You need your kick. Blind is incredible. It's an off DR CC. It doesn't DR with anything. We have 5 seconds AoE, great for peeling, amazing for finishing kills. Imagine having Stun String Blind. Holy cow. Asphyx is now 5 seconds too. IBF, that's your wall. Gets you out of stuns too. Short IBF, absolutely. Crit chance, sure. Asphyx, auto pick, and everything as Frost and Unholy as everything. That's a 5-second stun now. That's crazy. They buffed it. It's a 5-second stun. Incredible. Runic Generation is very good for Unholy. Then Insidious is just attack speed reduction is really good for preventing against those Fury Warriors and those Assassination Rogues that have a tendency to do a lot of damage to us. This helps. Then giving us our own attack speed is amazing for Unholy because it increases the rate in which you get sudden doom procs. And it just does a lot of damage. Your melee hits are big with that big 2-handed weapon. Finally, Empower Rune weapon. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, Flark. if you get the Empower Rune weapon end cap right now, you cannot get A-Bomb Limb. That's okay, we're still in pre-patch. Of course, when Dragonflight releases, you get your level 70, you're going right down to A-Bomb Limb and you're gonna have both of these. Spoiler alert, yes, that is what Dragonflight guides are gonna look like. You're gonna have both of these, no question. Soul Reaper sucks, don't even pick it. But of course, you're gonna have both of those. But we don't need to do that now, because like I said, Covenants are working. You have A-Bomb, you're still playing Necro, so you get to choose Empower. Empower on Unholy is the most fun thing ever that I've ever done. It is so incredible. It gives you haste, which we talked about how important it is to smooth out your rotation during all your setup globals, and insane runic generation, which maybe Frost had plenty of, but Unholy did not. Unholy actually could be rune starved in a PvP environment because everything you could spend at a ranged. So even when you got kited, you could keep spending runes, and Empower helps with that by giving you rune generation during your burst window. When you play Unholy with Empower Rune Weapon, you will never want to switch back to anything else. It is the smoothest feeling of every burst window. Because remember, at the beginning of expansions, our secondary stats get a lot lower. And Unholy tends to suffer because you don't have a lot of secondary stats, meaning you're sluggish. Globals make it very hard for you to set up, and people are bursting you before you can even play. Well, Empower Rune Weapon and Unholy Assault give you 35% haste between them in your burst windows. That's almost an entire expansion's worth of haste. It probably is an entire expansion's worth of haste in your burst windows right off the bat. Incredible. Finally, we have this right side of the row. We have Ghoul reducing the damage people do to you. I mean, that's awesome. That's just a permanent passive wall. You doing more damage to them is also good. Strength is good. 15% damage reduction for 12 seconds is fantastic. That's just another wall. And it increases the duration that you're immune to polymorph, fear, charm, that kind of stuff. I didn't really want Unholy Ground, but that is the way to get to Will of the Necropolis. I'm assuming that's how you say that, which I really, really did want. This thing is amazing. There's a specific, interesting niche reason why it's amazing, and I guess I'll get into that despite having talked for so long already. You know how Death Strike heals based on a portion of the damage that you've taken? You can see right here. The more bursts that you take, the more Death Strike heals, making it kind of low synergy with walls, because if you take less damage, you heal for less. That's so weird. The way that Will of the Necropolis works is that it doesn't have that counter synergy with Death Strike. It applies as like healing done, or maybe even like absorbed damage, which means the damage taken still counts for the amount of damage you've taken for Death Strike, and then it just absorbs it. It just like heals that damage, like that 35% you were going to reduce it. Instead, it kind of like absorbs 35% of the damage, but you still get those massive Death Strikes, right? So when you drop below 30% health, it immediately applies to that portion of the hit, and you still get that huge Death Strike heal. Incredible. So it's like synergistic with our class, which is great because it's a talent for our class. But wow, I mean, it's so much survivability when you run Will of the Necropolis, and of course you still want to improve Death Strike for more healing, duh, and then more stamina, because our healing is all health based, and having a lot of stamina is extremely good. So this toolkit right here is a really good general use Death Knight tree for the pre-patch. And once Dragonflight comes out, I'll probably have two different versions of this, one for Frost, and one for magical damage reduction, and one for physical damage reduction. And that's your talents. Boom, we're done. Holy cow. Finally, Covenants. This is it. This is the final thing that you have to worry about in pre-patch. And I'm going over it really quick because it's about to be removed and jettisoned from the game forever, and good riddance. But yes, I'm still running Necrolord. So we ran Necrolord the entire expansion and the pre-patch, but it's just too good. A-Bomb plus the Unity Legendary. So much output. And the Soulbind is still really good. You get your Mastery from Volatile Solvent, and you get 6% damage from Kevin Zoozling, and then you just go down the same row we've been going down the entire expansion. If you're not familiar with this, don't worry, it's almost out of the game, but you grab the first, then you go down the Potency, Internal Hunger, Oozes, Insatiable, Plagueborn, Convocation. Literally don't think this actually works right now, but who cares? Ultimate Form, Embrace Death when you are running the Death Coil build, which we talked about, go back in the video, or Lingering Plague if you're using the Disease build. Shield Resistance, Kevin Zoozling. That's it. Necrolord, still. Get that A-bomb limb so you can have him power at the same time. Plague Divisor, still. This exact path, these exact soul binds. That's it. Now you will go into every arena in pre-patch and fucking slaughter. Except if you go into DH. They're kind of broken right now. But everything else is going to get destroyed by you. Mark my words. Okay, so that's it. Guys, have fun. That was 4 unique unholy builds that bring you back to the days of rot, necromancy, pets, minions, shadow, ranged pressure. I feel like, and it's all from this, without grinds and without borrowed power. I feel like this is the best version of the game that I've played in 5 years, if not ever. Already. Guys, have fun. I'll be making a few videos and streaming every day. If you guys want to watch me, my pre-patch adventure going into Dragonflight, and then of course, when Dragonflight comes out, guides, comp guides, other class guides, everything you could possibly imagine. Subscribe if you want to. Mean a lot to me. But really, what's more important, have a good time. I really want everybody to have fun with this expansion. I want us to have fun together. I'll see you soon. Peace.